For 3 days, someone silently followed Keanu Reeves through the streets of Los Angeles, never speaking, never approaching. Was it a threat, a desperate plea, or something far more haunting? When Keanu finally turned to confront them, what he discovered would shake him to the core and change everything. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. It was just after 10 in the evening when Keanu Reeves stepped out of the modest brick auditorium in downtown Los Angeles. The event had been heartfelt, a small fundraiser for underfunded public schools in East LL, where Keanu had quietly donated without seeking any attention. Dressed simply in jeans, boots, and a dark blazer, he waved off the few photographers who lingered at the edges of the sidewalk. He preferred to keep his presence low-key, to let the spotlight shine on the cause, not on him. The street was unusually quiet for a Thursday. Most of the crowd had dispersed, leaving only the faint hum of distant traffic and a cool breeze pushing wrappers and leaves along the pavement. Keanu approached his black SUV idling near the curb. His longtime driver, Evan, gave a small nod from the front seat. As Keanu reached for the handle, something made him pause. Across the street, partially concealed behind a battered electrical box, stood a figure. Small, still, barely more than a silhouette in the dim light. The person looked young, though the hoodie obscured most of their face. They didn't move, didn't call out, just stood and watched. Keanu squinted, trying to make out a face. The figure took a half-step back, vanishing into the deeper shadow behind the metal box. It wasn't the first time in his life he'd encountered fans in odd places or paparazzi testing boundaries. But this felt different. This was quiet, purposeful, not a camera in sight. He opened the SUV door and got in, but glanced once more in the rearview mirror before pulling away. The spot behind the electrical box was now empty. "Did you see that?" Keanu asked quietly. Evan frowned. "The kid? Yeah, I caught a glimpse. Thought it was just someone waiting on a ride." Keanu didn't respond. He wasn't sure what to make of it. The moment clung to him like static on his skin. The next morning came with the familiar rhythm of filming. Keanu was back on set, this time on a quiet lot tucked away in the Hollywood Hills. The air smelled of sawdust and coffee. Makeup artists chatted as they dabbed on subtle effects for a scene later that day. Between camera setups, Keanu wandered to the edge of the lot for a bit of fresh air. That's when he saw them again. Same small frame, same hoodie. This time, crouched behind a stack of equipment cases just outside the lot's fence line. They were watching. Carefully. Deliberately. The moment their eyes met, the figure darted away behind the trailers, vanishing into the alley beyond the lot. Keanu's heart kicked a little harder this time. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't a one-off. It was now 2 days in a row. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. There was no threat, no approach. Just presence. Just watching. Still, something inside him stirred. A quiet alarm. He made a mental note to remain aware, but he didn't expect to see them again so soon. The third day brought Keanu to his martial arts studio in Koreatown, tucked between a noodle shop and an herbal medicine store. It was a place where he trained often in peace, away from flashing lights and fame. The morning session was calm, filled with the rhythmic sound of fists meeting pads, instructors counting reps in soft, disciplined tones, and the quiet breathing of focus. As class wrapped, Keanu changed into a black hoodie and jeans and exited through the side alley where Evan was already waiting with the SUV. Keanu appreciated the privacy of that entrance. It offered a few quiet minutes of solitude between studio and car. But as he turned the corner onto the alley, his steps faltered. There, just past the garbage bins, half shielded behind a wire fence, stood the figure again. Same posture, same distance, Same silence. They didn't run this time. They simply stood and stared. Keanu didn't move, neither did the kid. For several long seconds, they remained in a stillness that felt electric. Something about the moment pressed into Keanu's chest, not fear exactly, but a weight, a heaviness that asked for attention. Then, almost as if they realized they had stayed too long, the figure turned and disappeared into the narrow side street, slipping into the flow of pedestrians like a ghost dissolving into mist. Keanu climbed into the SUV in silence. Evan didn't ask this time. Instead, he glanced in the side mirror, scanning the sidewalk behind them. "That's 3 days," Evan said finally, his voice low. Keanu nodded. "Same kid. What do you want to do?" Keanu stared out the window, watching the city blur past. "Not the cops. Not yet. You think it's just a fan?" "I don't know," Keanu murmured. "But it doesn't feel like that." There was no selfie attempt, no autograph request, no shouting or camera flashes. Just presence. Quiet, almost invisible presence. The kind that didn't demand anything. It just lingered. Back at home that evening, Keanu walked through his modest garden behind the house, trying to clear his thoughts. The kid had shown up in 3 different places, across 3 parts of the city. That meant they were tracking him. Not by accident, not by social media. That kind of consistency required intention, resources, or desperation. He thought about their size, their stance, the way they never approached, only watched. Were they waiting for something? Keanu stood by the koi pond, hands in his pockets, the cool wind pressing against his skin. He didn't feel fear, he felt curiosity, concern. Who was this shadow, and what did they want from him? The next morning, Keanu made a quiet decision. If this was to continue, he needed to understand it, not react out of fear, but move with awareness. He called Evan and Mark, his longtime head of security. Mark was ex-LAPD, built like a rock and trusted with Keanu's life more than once. "Keep it discreet," Keanu said. "No uniforms, no threats. Just watch. We need to know if they show again." Mark took it seriously. "You think it's a stalker?" "I think it's something else, but I won't know until we see more." That day was quiet. Keanu went to a script table read in Burbank, followed by a costume fitting for an upcoming role. Mark kept a silent distance, watching from afar. Evan drove his usual routes. Nothing unusual happened, until the sun began to set. As they pulled out of the studio's underground garage, Mark's voice came through the earpiece. "Passenger side, park bench, 50 yards up, hoodie, same height. Could be them." Keanu turned his head slightly. There they were. This time sitting, not hiding. On a bench beneath a row of jacaranda trees, their backpack clutched tight, gaze fixed directly at the departing SUV. Keanu didn't look away. Neither did they. It wasn't a stare of threat or challenge. It was a stare of longing. Or was it need? That night, Keanu barely touched his dinner. He sat with his thoughts, piecing together the images, the fleeting appearances, the retreating steps, the silence that followed him through the days. Why him? He wasn't the easiest celebrity to track. He lived without an entourage, no Twitter, no public schedule. Yet this stranger had followed him to 3 different, unrelated locations. There was a reason behind it, and Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't fame, obsession, or danger. It felt personal. That evening, he pulled out an old notebook where he jotted private thoughts. He sketched the shape of the figure, scribbled a few questions. Then one line, underlined twice. "Who sees me as their only way forward?" He didn't have an answer, not yet. But he knew something for certain now. This was no coincidence. It was a call, and Keanu Reeves was going to answer it. Keanu stood over the long glass table in his home office, watching the laptop screen as Mark scrubbed through security footage. The room was quiet except for the soft clicking of the mouse and the occasional whisper of the air conditioning. It was nearly midnight, but neither of them had considered sleep. The footage from the martial arts studio had just finished playing, and now Mark queued up the segment from the parking garage near the Burbank lot. "There," Mark said, pausing the video. He zoomed in on the grainy image. "Same build, same hoodie. Looks like they're waiting, not wandering." Keanu leaned in, eyes narrowing at the still frame. The figure was perched on a low wall outside the gated lot, sitting with legs pulled tight to their chest. Even with the low resolution, something about the posture was unmistakable, still, focused, intent. "Timestamp says they were there almost 2 hours before you left the building," Mark continued. "They never came close, never moved toward the entrance, just sat, watched." Keanu ran a hand through his hair. "That's deliberate. That's not someone just passing by." Mark nodded. "They're tracking your movements, but they're not making a move. No approach, no communication, and no aggression. But it's clear they're not doing this by accident." He clicked open another file, this one from a street camera near the charity event. Different angle, but same person. Look at the shoes. One's taped at the toe. Same rip on the right shoulder of the hoodie. I'd say early teens. 13 or 14 maybe. Could be younger. Thin, possibly underweight. Keanu felt the unease creep deeper into his chest. "You think they're homeless?" "Could be. Clothes are too big. Same hoodie all 3 days. No phone in hand, no earbuds. And definitely no adult around." He stared at the image again, now zoomed in. The kid's face was partially turned, obscured by the hoodie, but what was visible told a quiet story. Hollow cheeks, eyes fixed forward, a backpack slung too tightly over one shoulder. "Still no sign of a weapon?" Keanu asked. Mark shook his head. Nothing in their hands, and no signs of casing a location. Not the behavior of someone scoping out a robbery. They're not looking for angles. They're looking at you. Keanu nodded slowly, but something in him refused to go to the next logical step. "You're still thinking it's a threat?" Mark hesitated. "I'm not ruling it out, but honestly, it doesn't feel like that." "Feels like what?" Keanu asked. Mark paused the footage and looked at him. Desperation. Keanu sat back in his chair, the weight of that word pressing into him. The still image on the screen stared back, silent, uncertain, and entirely alone. He rubbed his temples. "Don't call the police yet." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "I see fear, not danger. And if I'm wrong, I'll take responsibility. But something tells me this kid isn't trying to hurt anyone." Mark closed the laptop and folded his arms. "So, what's the next step?" Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "We keep watching, but from a distance. I don't want to scare them, just be aware. And if they show up again, I want to be the one to approach. Not security, not you, me." Mark didn't argue. He just nodded. "I'll set up a couple mobile cams, low profile, and I'll keep a tail on your schedule for the next week." Keanu gave a grateful nod. As Mark gathered his gear and left the house, the silence settled in again. The house felt different tonight. He had lived here for over a decade, a home tucked away in the hills with quiet corners, old books, and warm wooden beams. But tonight, it felt like every shadow carried a question he couldn't answer. He made tea in the kitchen and sat at the long oak counter, the lights dimmed. The steam curled softly upward, untouched. Why him? He'd met 1,000 people in his career. Fans, strangers, seekers, critics. He'd been stopped at airports, followed down streets, even once confronted in a hotel elevator by a man claiming to be his reincarnated brother. But this was different. The kid hadn't spoken, hadn't posted a viral video, hadn't begged for anything. They hadn't even approached him. They'd just watched, followed, waited. He turned the question over again in his head. Was it just the idea of him? Some child believing he could fix something in their life? Or was there something deeper? He walked to the window overlooking the dark hillside. From here, He could see the faint flicker of the city in the distance. Traffic lights, restaurant signs, lives moving endlessly forward. Somewhere out there, that kid was probably curled up in a doorway, a stairwell, or behind a dumpster. Alone, cold, waiting for morning. The thought made his chest ache. He thought of himself as a teenager. All that pain, the loss, the instability, his mother doing everything she could, and still, life often felt like a drifting sea with no shore. What if he hadn't had that small thread of family to hold on to? What if he'd had no one? He looked back toward the now closed laptop, those hollow cheeks, the tight clutch on the backpack, the stillness. It was the stillness that stayed with him most. People who wanted something from him were never still. They reached, shouted, pulled. Stillness. That was a different language. It was the language of someone hoping not to be chased away. Keanu carried the tea upstairs to his room, untouched. Sleep didn't come easy. His eyes stayed open long into the night, staring at the ceiling. Who was this child? And why, out of everyone in the world, were they watching him? By morning, Keanu had made up his mind. He would follow his instincts. Quietly, carefully, and with respect. He would keep his team informed, but the next move had to be his alone. If the kid returned, he would find a way to talk. Not scare, not pressure. Just talk. After a quiet breakfast, he met Evan in the driveway. The sky was soft with overcast clouds, promising a rare cool day in Los Angeles. "Any sign?" Keanu asked as he climbed in. Evan shook his head. "Nothing this morning, but Mark set up the mobile units near the studio and the cafe. We'll know if they show," he answered candidly, tapping his fingers gently against the armrest as they pulled onto the street. All day he moved through meetings and table reads, but part of his mind stayed on alert. He found himself glancing at corners, pausing just a moment longer at windows, scanning crowds as he exited each building. By late afternoon, there was still no sign. Mark called in a check-in just before sunset. "Still nothing, but I've got footage to review tonight." Keanu thanked him and ended the call. Then, as he looked up, he saw something that made him stop mid-step. Across the street from the small independent theater where he had just wrapped a voiceover session, a lone figure sat on the sidewalk, back pressed against the side of a boarded-up storefront, hoodie pulled tight, backpack in lap. Keanu felt a chill ripple through him. It was them. They weren't hiding this time. They weren't running. They were waiting. He stayed still, observing from behind the tinted window of the SUV. People walked past the kid without looking. A man with headphones nearly stumbled over their legs. A woman pushing a stroller turned her head away. No one saw them. Not really. But Keanu saw. He leaned forward. "Evan, pull over." "You sure?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, let me go alone." He stepped out slowly, careful not to move too fast or draw attention. The sidewalk was cracked beneath his boots. The hum of the city filled the background. Cars, voices, a bus groaning to a stop. As he approached, the kid looked up. Their eyes met again. This time, Keanu saw more. There was fear, yes, but also something else. Recognition. They didn't move. They didn't speak. Keanu stopped a few feet away and crouched down, keeping his voice calm and level. "You've been watching me," he said softly. The kid clutched the backpack tighter but didn't run. Keanu waited. "You don't have to say anything," he added. "I just wanted you to know, I see you." A long pause. Then the kid blinked, lips trembling, and nodded once. Just once. Before standing up and walking away into the coming dusk. Keanu didn't follow. He didn't need to. For now, the message had been sent. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Keanu spent the next day crafting a plan. Not one designed to confront, but to create a moment where the silence could be broken safely. He didn't want to scare the girl. He didn't want to corner her. He just needed a natural, quiet opportunity to meet her without pressure. So he chose a small cafe in West Hollywood, one he visited often. It had a rear exit that opened into an alley with low foot traffic, the equivalent. A place without chaos or onlookers. He texted Mark early that morning. "No security today. Keep your distance. Let's see what happens." By noon, Keanu was seated at a small outdoor table beneath the cafe's striped awning. He sipped a hot tea and chatted with the owner, who was used to his presence and treated him like any other regular. Every few minutes, he scanned the corners of the street through the reflections in the windows. She was there, across the street, half hidden behind a parked food truck, hoodie pulled low, backpack slung high. She wasn't moving, just watching. Keanu stayed a while longer than usual. He ordered a muffin he didn't touch. Then, after 40 minutes, he stood up, thanked the staff, and walked casually through the cafe's back door. The alley behind the cafe was lined with weathered bricks and scattered trash bins. The afternoon sun poured down at an angle, casting long shadows. Keanu's boots echoed on the pavement. He sensed her before he saw her, a quick movement in his periphery. She'd come around the side of the building, maybe to get a better view, but when she saw him, she froze. He didn't move closer. He just looked at her and said softly, "Hey." Startled, she turned to run. Her thin legs moved quickly, but the pavement wasn't even. Her left foot caught on a cracked edge near a storm drain, and in an instant, she went down hard. Keanu's heart jumped. He rushed toward her. She was curled on the ground, one hand gripping her ankle, the other clutching her backpack. She tried to sit up, but winced in pain. "Don't move," Keanu said gently, kneeling beside her. "You okay? Just breathe." She blinked up at him, her face pale and smudged with dirt. Her hoodie had slipped down just enough for him to see tangled brown hair and frightened eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to scare you." Keanu offered his hand. "You didn't scare me," he said, "but you're hurt." She hesitated, then slowly reached out. Her fingers were cold and thin as he helped her sit up. She immediately tucked her backpack behind her, as if afraid he might take it. Keanu noticed the worn corner of a sketchbook peeking out from the unzipped top. The girl winced as she shifted, trying not to put weight on her left foot. Keanu took off his jacket and folded it into a pad, placing it behind her back. "You don't have to run," he said quietly, kneeling in front of her. "I'm not here to get you in trouble." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted between his face and the alley exit. Then, as if something in his tone registered, she nodded faintly. "What's your name?" Keanu asked. She didn't respond. "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to tell me yet." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small bottle of water. He held it out without moving closer. She stared at it for a moment, then slowly reached forward and took it. Her hands trembled as she opened the cap. She drank like someone who hadn't tasted clean water in a while. Slow at first, then with quiet urgency. Keanu waited. He didn't press her with questions. He just sat beside her in the alley while cars rolled by blocks away and birds chirped on distant telephone wires. After a long silence, she spoke. He looked over. "My name is Ava," she said, more clearly this time, still not meeting his eyes. "That's a beautiful name," Keanu said. "Ava, you're limping. I think you sprained your ankle. You need to get it looked at." "I'll be fine," she said quickly, her voice rising. "I just need to find another place to rest. I didn't mean to be near you, She trailed off. Her fingers clutched the backpack again, pulling it tighter to her chest. "You've been watching me for a few days now," Keanu said gently. "I was hoping we could talk. I just want to know why." Ava's eyes welled suddenly, though she blinked fast to hold it back. "I thought maybe if I showed you," she mumbled, "but then I got scared." Keanu gestured to the backpack. "May I see what you wanted to show me?" Ava hesitated again. She held the bag tighter. "I won't take it," Keanu said softly. "Just a look. That's all." With trembling fingers, She reached inside and slowly pulled out the sketchbook. The cover was frayed and stained. Tape held the binding together. A small sticker, worn to the point of being unrecognizable, was faded on the corner. She held it out without opening it. "You'll think I'm weird." Keanu shook his head. "I don't think that's possible." She looked away as he opened the sketchbook. The first page made him stop breathing for a second. It was him, not just a quick drawing, but a portrait, detailed, haunting, and alive. Every line in his face was studied but not exaggerated. His eyes in the drawing looked tired, compassionate, real. He turned the page slowly. Scene after scene unfolded, moments from his films, reimagined in pencil and charcoal. Some were familiar shots, an alley fight from John Wick, a rooftop from The Matrix. But they weren't simple recreations. They were transformed, infused with color where none had existed, shifted to reflect emotion that had never been captured on screen. There was one sketch of a man sitting on a subway bench, not fighting or running, but waiting. His head bowed, his hands resting between his knees. The background was empty, as if the world had abandoned him. Keanu looked at Ava. "You did these?" She nodded, biting her bottom lip. "I've never shown them to anyone. I study scenes on the library computers. I pause the videos and draw what I see. Sometimes I make it different, how I think it should have ended, or how it made me feel." He turned another page. It was a scene he didn't recognize. A man, clearly him, reaching out his hand toward a shadowy figure standing in the corner of a cracked alley. Keanu felt a shiver. It was today, this moment, drawn before it happened. "Ava, this is incredible." She looked at him, confused. "I mean it," Keanu said. "This is more than talent. This is emotion, perspective. You're telling stories with your hands." Ava's eyes filled again. She blinked hard and looked away. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "Back where?" She shook her head. "I just want to be left alone. But I wanted someone to see it. I thought maybe you would, because..." She trailed off, but Keanu didn't push. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad he carried for ideas. Tearing off a clean sheet, he scribbled something down. "This is an address to a youth shelter I work with," he said. "It's not perfect, but they'll treat you with respect. No pressure. You can sleep, eat, and keep your sketchbook safe." Ava clutched the book to her chest. "Would you come with me?" she asked softly. Keanu paused. "Yes, if you want me to." She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. He stood and offered his hand again. She took it. Her ankle gave slightly, but he steadied her. They walked out of the alley together, Ava limping, Keanu supporting her gently. Evan pulled up a moment later, stepping out quickly with concern, but Keanu gave him a nod to stay calm. As they got into the SUV, Ava curled against the window, still holding the sketchbook like a lifeline. Keanu looked at her, heart heavy and hopeful all at once. He didn't know who she truly was. He didn't know what pain she carried. But he knew one thing with certainty. She had found him for a reason, and he was going to find out why. The next morning came with a soft drizzle, tapping against the car windows as Keanu and Ava sat parked outside a small 24-hour diner tucked between a gas station and a laundromat, the kind of place where nobody cared about celebrity and the coffee was served in chipped white mugs. Keanu glanced over at Ava. She looked better this morning. Still in the same hoodie, but her face was a little less pale. Her hair had been brushed. She was holding her sketchbook tight, like always, but there was a subtle difference now, a sense of less tension in her shoulders, as if the night's rest and quiet had peeled away one layer of fear. "You hungry?" Keanu asked. Ava hesitated, then gave a small nod. They stepped inside, the bell over the door ringing softly. A tired-looking waitress waved at Keanu like he was just another regular. He liked that about this place. Fame didn't follow him through the door here. They sat in a corner booth. Keanu ordered black coffee and a short stack of pancakes for himself. Ava stared at the menu for a long time, then said quietly, "Same." When the plates arrived, she ate slowly at first, cutting each bite carefully. But soon her pace picked up, as if hunger was finally catching up to her. Keanu waited until she was halfway through before speaking again. "So, Ava Moreno." She looked up sharply, startled. He smiled gently. "You told me your first name yesterday." I looked up missing youth records. I wasn't trying to pry. I just wanted to know who you were. She didn't speak, but her hands stilled around her fork. "I'm not angry," Keanu said. "I just want to understand." Ava swallowed hard and lowered her gaze. "My parents," she said, voice thin. "They died 3 months ago. Car accident. Hit by a truck on Sunset. I was at school." Keanu's heart sank. He reached for his coffee, but didn't drink. "I had nowhere to go," she continued. "No family. The social worker put me with this woman in the valley. She didn't like me, said I was too quiet. She yelled all the time, took my sketchbook once and threw it in the trash." Her lip trembled at the memory. She didn't cry, but she blinked quickly and kept talking. "Stay invisible, sir." "So I ran. I've been on the streets since then, sleeping in a maintenance room at the old train station, washing up at libraries, just trying to stay invisible." Keanu sat back, absorbing it all. She was 13. 13, alone, in a city like Los Angeles. She picked up a piece of pancake, turned it over, then added softly, "But I watched your movies in the library. Over and over. I memorized them, drew them." She opened her sketchbook and turned it to a new page. "I think I know why you look sad sometimes, even when you're smiling." Keanu looked at the drawing. It wasn't from a film. It was him, sitting alone in a chair, head down, hands curled around a coffee mug. The details were exact. Not just physical features, but emotion, weariness, something he recognized in himself, even though no camera had ever captured it. He cleared his throat and said quietly, "You're very perceptive." Ava shrugged. "It's how I remember people. I draw them. It's easier than talking." "Your parents," Keanu asked gently, "they worked in film?" Ava nodded. "Storyboard artists. They used to do background layouts and scene sequencing for Warner Brothers. Not the famous stuff, but they loved it." She flipped through the sketchbook again and pointed to a series of scenes. Old noir frames, some fantasy landscapes, a creature mid-transformation. All hand-drawn in pencil, inked with the steady hand of someone far beyond her age. "My dad taught me how to draw shadows," Ava said. "My mom taught me how to find the story in someone's eyes. They always said a good drawing isn't about accuracy, it's about honesty." Keanu took a slow sip of his coffee. His throat felt tight. "I'm sorry you lost them," he said. "I still hear them sometimes," she whispered. "When I draw, it's like they're standing behind me, correcting lines, giving tips." The waitress came by, refilled their mugs, and moved on without a word. Ava looked up. "You're different in real life." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "You're quieter. In movies, you look strong, dangerous sometimes, but in real life, you're calm, like a pond." He smiled softly. "I take that as a compliment." Ava folded her arms around her sketchbook again. "I followed you because I didn't know who else to trust. You felt safe." Keanu's smile faded. He stared at the sugar container on the table for a moment. "You shouldn't have had to make that choice. A kid should never have to follow a stranger to feel safe." Ava didn't argue. She just nodded. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said again. I thought maybe if you saw my drawings, you'd understand something." "What did you want me to understand?" Ava didn't answer at first. Then she reached into the back pocket of her sketchbook and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was old, creased along familiar lines. She handed it to Keanu. He unfolded it slowly. It was a copy of a storyboard sheet. At the bottom were two signatures, Luis and Maria Moreno. In the corner, in a child's handwriting, was a tiny scrawl, Ava, age 7. They both used to take me to the studio sometimes. I watched them work. That's where I saw you once, years ago. I remembered. Keanu looked down at the paper, at her name, at her parents. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, carefully folded the paper again and handed it back. They sat in silence for a while after that. The rain outside had stopped, leaving streaks of water on the window that caught the morning light. Eventually, Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out a pen. He scribbled something on a napkin and slid it across the table. "This is my assistant's number. Her name's Joanna. She's kind, discreet. If you ever need anything and I'm not around, call her." Ava looked at the napkin, then back at him. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I know," Keanu replied. "That's why I want to help." He looked down at her sketchbook again. "You said something earlier," he said slowly, "that I look sad, even when I'm smiling. Why do you think that is?" Ava's voice was soft. "Because you carry people with you." Keanu didn't move, didn't blink. "What do you mean?" "People who aren't here anymore. You carry them like pictures in your pocket. You don't show them, but they're always with you." For a long moment, he couldn't speak. She had put into words something no interviewer, no friend, no script had ever said out loud. And she was 13. "I lost people too," she continued. "But it's different when you're small. You don't get to decide how to carry them. They just become part of your breathing." Keanu leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes heavy. "You remind me of someone I knew," he said. "A long time ago. She was quiet too, saw the world like you do." Ava tilted her head. "What happened to her?" "She grew up," he said. "But she never lost the part of her that believed in other people, even when they didn't believe in themselves." Ava gave a faint smile. It didn't last long, but it was there. "You think I should go to the shelter?" she asked. "I think you should have a warm bed, food every day, space to draw without fear. You deserve that." She tapped her fingers on the sketchbook. "Can I show them these?" "You can show the world," Keanu said, "but only when you're ready." She nodded. He left a generous tip on the table, not out of show, but because it was habit. As they stepped outside, the clouds had parted slightly, revealing a hint of sunlight. The air smelled like wet pavement and syrup. As they walked to the SUV, Keanu held the door open for her. She paused before climbing in. "Do you think they'd be proud of me?" she asked quietly. "Your parents?" She nodded. Keanu didn't hesitate. "Will he be in awe?" Ava climbed in and shut the door. Keanu followed, heart full of something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just responsibility. It was purpose. And maybe, just maybe, a second chance to help someone carry the weight. The following afternoon, Keanu sat alone in his home library. Sunlight filtered through the large windows, casting soft light on the dark wood shelves lined with books and film memorabilia. Ava's sketchbook lay closed on the table in front of him. He hadn't dared to open it the night before. Something about it felt sacred, as if rushing through it would miss the soul hidden in the pages. But now, with the house quiet and no distractions, he carefully opened the cover. The first page held a pencil drawing of him standing at the edge of a burning building. It wasn't from any film he'd done, but it looked like it could have been. His stance, the smoke swirling around his boots, the haunted look in his eyes. It was cinematic, but it wasn't just style. There was emotion in it. A story that hadn't been told yet. He turned the page. Scene after scene spilled out. Reimagined frames from John Wick, The Matrix, even older films like A Walk in the Clouds. But they weren't simple reproductions. She had taken liberties, adjusted angles, shifted lighting. Some were sketched in charcoal, others inked in fine lines with astonishing detail. Each one felt like a frame of a dream someone had after watching the movie and waking up with a deeper truth. One page showed Neo standing not in the Matrix's green digital landscape, but in a quiet forest at dawn, barefoot, hand extended toward a tree blooming with code-like blossoms. Another captured a new vision of John Wick, sitting in an empty church surrounded by shadows of the people he'd lost. There were no guns, no blood, just silence and sorrow. Keanu leaned forward, breath shallow. This wasn't just fan art. This was direction, vision. She was rewriting film language using pencil and paper. As he turned to another page, he paused. It was a fully inked storyboard panel, 4 frames. A girl sitting on a bench, a man walking past. The girl glances up, recognition in her eyes. The man, unaware, keeps walking. The final frame zooms in on her expression. Not longing, not fear, but something deeper. It was Ava, and it was him. He leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed. How had she done this? How had someone so young, so alone, managed to create something that felt like a lost language of cinema? He heard the front door creak and soft footsteps padding toward the room. Ava appeared at the threshold, still wearing her hoodie, hands in her pockets. "Did you look?" she asked. Keanu nodded. "I did." She stood still, almost bracing. "It's not perfect," she said quickly. "Some of the frames are too fast, and I didn't get the perspective right on the staircase shot. I was trying to learn how to do transitions with motion blur, but..." Keanu held up his hand gently. "Stop." She blinked. "You don't need to apologize. What you've done here, it's extraordinary." Ava stepped inside, her fingers still twitching with nervous energy. She looked around at the shelves, at the vintage film reels and old scripts neatly tucked into leather-bound folders. Keanu gestured to the chair across from him. She hesitated, then sat down slowly. He placed the sketchbook between them. "These," he said, tapping one of the pages, "aren't just drawings, they're scenes. They have motion, emotion, timing. Where did you learn to do this?" Ava rubbed her hands together and stared down at her lap. "I started watching behind-the-scenes videos on YouTube when I was 10. Then I read every book on cinematography the library had. Every time I moved shelters, I'd check the next library's film section. Some had old DVDs with commentary tracks. I used to listen to them with headphones and sketch while they talked." She looked up at him, more confident now. "I didn't just want to draw. I wanted to understand how movies feel the way they do. Why certain scenes make your chest hurt. Why others make you hold your breath. It's not just the acting or the story. It's lighting, framing." Keanu nodded slowly. "That's something even seasoned filmmakers forget. I've been studying screenplays too," she added. "There's a website at the library that has full scripts. I read them, then watch the movie to see what changed. I underline what worked and cross out what didn't." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to him. It was a mock script, page. The slug line read, "X abandoned train station, night." The scene unfolded like a short film, only 5 lines of action, 2 lines of dialogue. But it had rhythm, mood, voice. "You wrote this?" he asked. She nodded. "I've been practicing structure, setup, escalation, reversal, and resolution." He handed it back, a quiet awe settling over him. "You're not just copying movies," he said. "You're building your own." Ava smiled faintly. "I want to direct one someday, not just write or draw. I want to see it." Keanu leaned back in his chair, studying her face. She wasn't just talented. She was obsessed in the best way. Hungry to learn, determined to build her own path. "You know," he said, "when I first started acting, I didn't even know what a mark was. I used to hit the wrong light, ruin takes. I had no technical knowledge, but I was curious. That's what saved me. The same thing that's going to take you far." She bit her lip, unsure how to respond. "You're already doing the work," Keanu said. "Most people never start." She looked down at the sketchbook again. Do you think it's good enough? He smiled. I think it's real, and that's more rare than people realize. They moved into the living room, where the fireplace crackled softly. Ava sat cross-legged on the rug, sketchbook in her lap. Keanu poured her a cup of tea and placed it beside her, then settled into the armchair across from her. Can I show you something? She asked. Of course. She turned to the final pages of her sketchbook. They were newer, rougher, but there was a progression. An entire sequence, a girl, possibly Ava herself, climbing into a theater through a back alley, sneaking past rows of velvet seats, crawling into the projection booth and pressing play. The screen lights up. On it, herself, older, directing a scene, calling shots. Behind her, people moving props. Actors waiting, crew nodding, the camera catching her from behind as she commands the room. The final frame? A slow zoom out of a marquee, directed by Ava Moreno. Keanu stared for a long moment. The ambition, the belief, buried in those pencil lines. She wasn't just dreaming, she was predicting her future. Ava closed the book carefully, hugging it against her chest. Sometimes, she said quietly, when things got really bad, like when I didn't eat for 2 days or it rained through the roof and I couldn't sleep, I draw that last page, over and over, to remind myself not to quit. Keanu didn't reply right away. Instead, he stood and walked to a nearby shelf, pulling down a thick, bound folder. He brought it back and handed it to her. What's this? She asked. A storyboard from 47 Ronin. Original production draft. We used it to build the visual world. I want you to keep it. Her eyes widened. Really? I want you to study it, tear it apart, learn from it, and when you're done, we'll find someone for you to shadow. A real storyboard artist. Maybe even a director. Ava blinked fast, overwhelmed. You don't have to do that, she said. I know. That's why I'm doing it. Silence settled again, but it was warm now, full of understanding. Keanu walked over to the window and stared out into the hills. You said you watched me in the library, he said, over and over. Why me? Ava didn't hesitate. Because even when you were hurting, you never gave up. He turned back to her, eyes soft. Neither should you. She nodded. The fireplace crackled again. Keanu knew then that this was more than a rescue, more than a coincidence. Ava had found him for a reason, and maybe, just maybe, he had found her for one too. Later that evening, Keanu and Ava sat on the back patio of his home. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a soft purple glow in the sky. Wind rustled the tall eucalyptus trees nearby. Ava sat curled in a blanket, her fingers wrapped tightly around a warm mug of tea. She hadn't said much since dinner. Keanu didn't press. He knew better than to rush someone who'd spent months surviving in silence. Finally, her voice broke through the stillness. I didn't follow you because I wanted something from you. Keanu looked over at her. He nodded, inviting her to continue. I wasn't trying to be creepy or, I don't know, weird. He waited. I followed you because of something my dad said, right before he died. She set the mug down, her hands now resting in her lap. We used to work in the industry? Not for long, just enough to get a few credits. Mostly behind-the-scenes stuff, lighting, assistant storyboarder. Once helped on a big commercial for cars. He worked hard. Loved movies. Her voice caught. Keanu stayed silent, letting her find her pace. When things got bad at home, when Mom got sick, he had to take more shifts. But the last job he ever talked about was on the set of a film you were in. I don't even remember which one. I was little. But he always said the same thing. She looked up at Keanu, eyes shining. He said, Keanu Reeves is the only good man left in Hollywood. Keanu's chest tightened. Ava continued, her voice more fragile now. I didn't really understand what that meant until after he was gone. I was angry. At everything. The world didn't make sense anymore. My mom passed 3 months later, and suddenly I was just floating. No home, no school, no one checking in. Just me and my sketchbook. Keanu leaned forward slightly. I slept in abandoned stairwells, hid in bus stations, drew by flashlight, and the one thing I kept thinking about was what my dad said, over and over. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Maybe there was still one good man left. Keanu's throat tightened. She wasn't telling a story, she was opening a wound. And I thought, Ava said, if I could find you, if I could just show you what I made, maybe someone would finally see me. Maybe I wouldn't be invisible anymore. She looked away. I'm sorry I scared you. Keanu took a deep breath, the weight of her words pressing hard against his chest. You didn't scare me, he said softly. And he meant it. Ava didn't speak after that, her eyes fixed on the darkening sky, while the shadows of the trees stretched across the patio. Keanu sat beside her, his mind tracing every detail of her confession. The image of a child sleeping beside a flashlight, sketching her way through grief, settled deep in his heart. He hadn't expected this. He'd seen fans, even young ones, get overwhelmed. But this wasn't about fame. This was survival. Ava, he said after a long pause, you were never invisible. She gave a faint smile but didn't reply. He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. Your drawings, your pages, they have life in them. They carry your parents, their love, their passion. It's all there. She nodded. Barely. He continued. You followed me not because you needed money or attention, but because you were searching for something that still felt true. That's not weakness. That's courage. She looked at him, unsure how to hold those words. You think I'm brave? She asked quietly. I know you are. Ava picked up her sketchbook again. She flipped through until she reached a page halfway through. It wasn't a scene. It was a portrait. A man's face, kind and worn, sketched with fine strokes. His eyes were soft, the kind that held pain and patience. My dad, she said. Keanu leaned in. There was something familiar about the jawline, the curve of the brow. Em really admired you, she whispered. He said he saw you pause once between takes to help a crew guy pick up a light stand that had fallen. No cameras around, no one watching, just you in a quiet moment. He told me it meant more than any movie. Keanu closed his eyes briefly. I don't remember it, he admitted, but I believe him. Hell believed in kindness, Ava said, even when we had nothing. The sketchbook slipped from her fingers and Keanu caught it before it hit the ground. He held it gently, almost reverently. Then let's honor that, he said. Ava looked up, confused. I want to help you, Keanu continued, but not like a handout, not charity. I want to help you build what you came here to build. Her eyes widened. You mean, I want to make sure you never have to draw in the dark again. Tears welled at the corners of her eyes. She quickly wiped them away with her sleeve, but her breath caught in her throat. I thought if you just looked at my work, it'd be enough. Keanu smiled gently. It's more than enough. The next morning, Keanu made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to in years. A storyboard artist named Helena Cho. She'd worked on The Matrix, Constantine, and several other major films. He trusted her, not just with projects, but with people. She's 13, he said over the phone, but she's better than most students coming out of film school, and she's been through hell. Helena didn't hesitate. Bring her by tomorrow. Ava had slept in the guest room for the first time. The clean sheets, the quiet ceiling fan, and the soft glow of a nightlight in the corner. It was more comfort than she'd felt in months. When she emerged for breakfast, Keanu was already at the table, coffee in hand, and her sketchbook resting beside a plate of toast. You hungry? He asked. She nodded. He waited until she'd eaten a few bites before speaking. There's someone I want you to meet. She's a real pro, works in the industry. She'll look at your work, give you tips, maybe even let you sit in on a few sessions." Ava's eyes lit up. "Seriously?" Keanu nodded. "You're not just talented, Ava. You're ready. But you don't have to do it alone anymore." Her fork paused mid-air. "What if I mess up? What if I get nervous and can't draw?" "Then you'll learn, just like the rest of us." She exhaled slowly, the fear loosening its grip. That afternoon, they walked through the garden outside. Ava stopped at one of the benches, then pulled something from her hoodie pocket. A folded note, crumpled, yellowed from being carried too long. She handed it to Keanu. "It's from my mom," she said. "Wrote it before she passed. I read it when I'm scared." He unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "You are light. Even when it's dark, you shine. Don't forget that." Keanu folded it back carefully and returned it to her hand. "Team was right," he said. The late afternoon sun cast a golden hue over the garden as they sat in quiet. Ava leaned back, closing her eyes. "When I was out there," she said, "I kept thinking I had to be invisible to survive, hide in corners, stay quiet, don't ask for help." Keanu looked at her gently. "But that's not how we're meant to live." She nodded. "I know that now, and you're not invisible anymore." She smiled, then looked at her sketchbook. I think I'm ready to show the world what's in here." "Good," Keanu said. "Because the world needs it." And for the first time in a long time, Ava believed it. The next morning, Los Angeles was quiet beneath a layer of soft gray clouds. Keanu picked up Ava just after breakfast. She had dressed in one of the oversized t-shirts from the guest closet and jeans that barely fit her tiny frame. Her eyes still looked tired, but there was something new in them. Something that almost resembled hope. They drove across town in silence, Ava occasionally glancing out the window, unsure of where they were headed. When Keanu finally pulled into a small gated building near Koreatown, she sat up straighter. The building was clean, surrounded by a small garden with hand-painted tiles and a mural that showed children of every background standing shoulder to shoulder, holding brushes and instruments. Above it were the words, "You matter here." "This place," Keanu said gently, "has helped a lot of kids who didn't know where else to go. It's not just about giving you a place to stay. It's about helping you figure out who you are." Ava's grip tightened on her sketchbook. "I'm not staying forever, right?" Keanu gave her a soft smile. "No one's making you do anything. But I want you to meet the people here. They're good, and you deserve support." Inside, a woman named Carla welcomed them with open arms. Her energy was warm, her tone gentle. She'd worked at the shelter for over 20 years and had a natural gift for spotting what a kid needed most, whether it was space, encouragement, or a plate of food. Ava hesitated at first, but Carla didn't push. Instead, she asked Ava if she wanted to shower or rest, then led her to a private space where she could change. Within an hour, Ava returned to the main room in clean clothes, simple leggings and a fitted hoodie. She looked younger, more herself. Keanu stepped aside to give her room. While Ava quietly ate a hot meal at a corner table, Keanu walked outside and made a call. "Dion," he said as soon as she picked up. "You're calling me before noon. What's wrong?" Keanu chuckled softly. "Nothing. Actually, something good." She grew curious. "Talk to me." "I met someone. A girl. 13, homeless, but she's an artist, Diane. I mean, really an artist. It's not just talent. It's instinct. You should see her sketchbook. Her storyboards make studio stuff look like homework." There was a pause. "Where is she now?" Diane asked. "She's getting help at Rising Light, the shelter I've been working with." "And what do you want from me?" she asked, though her tone had already softened. "I want to know if she can shadow someone at our studio, not as a gimmick, not a publicity thing. I just want her around people who care about story and craft." Diane sighed. "Bring the sketchbook." Later that day, Keanu drove across town to Diane's office. He held Ava's sketchbook like a priceless artifact. It still smelled faintly of charcoal and old paper, the pages slightly curled from months of being carried everywhere. Diane was waiting in the glass conference room. Dressed in her usual sharp black blazer, hair pulled back, she was the kind of woman who didn't waste words or time. She had helped Keanu through some of his most difficult career choices, and she wasn't easily impressed. He handed her the book and took a seat across from her without saying a word. She opened it. For the first few minutes, she didn't speak. Her eyes moved from page to page. The silence grew so intense, Keanu almost interrupted, but he didn't. She turned to a double-page spread. It was a reimagined scene from John Wick, but told from the perspective of a child watching through a cracked door. Every panel bled with emotion, loss, tension, and an eerie kind of stillness. It wasn't just action, it was story. Diane finally looked up. "He's 13? Keanu nodded. Diane stared at the sketchbook again, turning a few more pages. One showed a completely original character, a quiet, elderly man carrying an old movie camera through an overgrown city. Every line suggested motion. There was loneliness in the wrinkles of his face, hope in the way he gripped the camera. "This isn't talent," Diane whispered. "This is rare genius." Keanu exhaled quietly. Diane closed the sketchbook and held it in her lap. "I don't say that lightly, Keanu. I've seen thousands of portfolios, MFA grads, veterans. No one draws like this." "He's been studying film technique on her own," Keanu added. "In public libraries, storyboarding, composition, even camera movement." Diane raised an eyebrow. "She's doing all this without guidance? He's doing all this from survival?" There was a long pause before Diane leaned back in her chair. "I'll have her sit in on our next creative team session," she said. "No promises, no pressure, just exposure. If she clicks with the team, we'll take it from there." Keanu smiled. "So, don't thank me yet. I haven't seen her in her room, but I'll tell you what. If she's half as focused as her pages are, the world is in for something." Keanu picked up the sketchbook again. He held it close, as if protecting it from dust. "She's more than focused. She's desperate to be seen. And she's ready." Diane softened. "Then let's give her that chance." That evening, Keanu returned to the shelter. Ava was sitting in a small art room, sketching quietly at a donated desk. There were a few other kids around, but she had tucked herself in the corner, headphones on, pencils scattered around her like they were soldiers in formation. He waited until she noticed him. She pulled the headphones down, startled but smiling. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she replied. He sat beside her. "I spoke with someone today. Someone important in the industry. She's going to let you observe one of the creative teams I work with." Ava's eyes grew wide. "Really? Really?" She looked away quickly, blinking hard. "You okay?" She nodded, but her voice cracked. "I'm just not used to people saying yes to me." "You're not here by accident, Ava. You didn't stumble into this. You made it happen. Through your work, through your courage." She clutched the edge of the table, trying to keep her hands from trembling. "You'll still be staying here at Rising Light for a while," Keanu said gently. "Just until we figure out what you need next. Carla's looking into some education programs, and I'm setting up transportation so you can get to the studio safely." Ava looked at him with something between gratitude and disbelief. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Keanu tilted his head slightly. "I know enough. I know you don't give up. I know you dream big. And I know your father believed in something real when he talked about kindness." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. "I miss him. I know." They sat in silence for a moment. Ava pulled out her sketchbook again and flipped to a new page. She drew a rough figure, a tall man, leaning over, placing a hand on the shoulder of a small girl who clutched a camera in her lap. Around them, the world faded into gray, but a beam of light shone down on them like a spotlight. She didn't say it, but Keanu understood. This wasn't just a drawing. It was her way of saying thank you. "You belong here, Ava," he said finally. And this time, she believed him. The next morning, Ava sat in the back seat of Keanu's quiet black SUV, nervously clutching her sketchbook. She wore the new sneakers Carla had given her and a plain dark hoodie to blend in. Her hair was freshly washed and tucked under a baseball cap. Keanu glanced at her through the rearview mirror, giving her a calm nod. "You don't need to say anything today," he told her. "Just watch. Just listen." She nodded. Her fingers tapped the corner of her sketchbook in quiet rhythm. They pulled into the back entrance of a mid-sized film lot in Burbank. This wasn't a big-budget blockbuster, but it was still a real set, with trailers, crew members rushing around, and folding chairs lined up in front of monitors. Ava's eyes grew wide as they passed the makeup truck, then the props station, then a group of extras rehearsing a background walk. Inside one of the production tents, Diane met them at the flap. Her sharp eyes scanned Ava from head to toe, not with judgment, but evaluation. He's invisible," Diane murmured. "Perfect." Keanu smiled. "Let's keep it that way, for now." They led Ava to the corner of a large open warehouse space, where the production team was setting up for a complex scene involving multiple camera angles. The director, a meticulous woman named Grace Lynn, stood by a digital storyboard on a monitor, walking through the planned shots with the cinematographer and assistant director. Ava sat quietly on a folding chair near a rack of lighting gels, eyes darting between Grace's gestures and the overhead rigging. No one paid attention to the small girl with the sketchbook. No one asked her questions or tried to engage, and that was exactly how she wanted it. For the next 2 hours, Ava filled pages. She mimicked the layout of the storyboard she saw on the monitor, but then she began to alter it, adjusting angles, shifting the staging. She noticed a lighting problem on a secondary shot and scribbled a note beside her version of the panel. "Too much shadow on the left actor's cheek. Try bounce card from stage right." Then she reimagined an entire coverage plan for a dialogue sequence between two characters standing at different depths of field. She flipped to a new page and began drawing again. No hesitation, no erasing. Her hands moved like they were translating something that already existed in her head, just waiting to be let out. At lunch break, Keanu found her still sitting in that chair, her tray untouched, sketchbook balanced on her knees. "Aren't you hungry?" "I will be. Just one more page." He peered over her shoulder, then blinked. The scene she was sketching hadn't even been filmed yet, but she'd drawn it from memory. Accurately, and fixed the camera blocking to make it smoother. Keanu pulled out his phone, took a silent photo of the sketch, then called Diane. 10 minutes later, Diane appeared at Ava's side, holding her salad bowl in one hand, sunglasses on, face unreadable. "Is this the scene from the detective's office?" she asked casually. Ava looked up, startled. "Yes. And this is your version of the shot sequence?" Ava nodded. Diane tilted her head. "You adjusted the angle here. It's just... the original one felt crowded," Ava said carefully. "The actor on the left would block the emotion on the right side. I thought if the camera moves 2 feet left, they'd both stay in frame, and the viewer could feel the shift in tone more clearly." Diane looked at her for a long moment. She lowered her sunglasses and studied Ava's sketch again. "Where did you learn to think like this?" Ava hesitated. She looked down at the lines she had drawn, then slowly whispered, "My mom taught me to see stories. My dad taught me to feel them." Keanu was quiet. Diane too. Then Diane gently asked, "What did your mom do?" She was a visual development artist, mostly freelance. She used to pause movies and ask me what the colors were trying to say. "And your dad?" "And he was a storyboard assistant for a while. He used to say that acting was just drawing with your soul." The air shifted around them. Diane sat down on the metal chair next to Ava and rested her salad bowl on her lap. "You know, professionals train for years to say what you just said in 2 sentences." Ava gave her a small shrug. "I didn't know it was rare. I just thought that's how people talked about film. Diane exhaled deeply. Let me show you something. She opened her tablet and pulled up the current digital storyboard for that day's shoot. Then she held it beside Ava's drawing. The differences were subtle, but Ava's version moved better. The eye line was preserved more naturally. The spatial awareness was sharper. The blocking respected emotional proximity instead of just visual balance. Keanu, Diane said softly, you didn't just find a good kid. You found a filmmaker. He didn't respond with words. He simply reached over and closed Ava's sketchbook, gently, like it was sacred. Can she stay? Diane asked. Ava perked up. Do you mean on set? Diane nodded. Under strict confidentiality. No media, no interference. But yes, she watches, she learns. And if she keeps this up, she'll be helping our team before she turns 14. Ava's voice wavered. I won't let you down. Diane leaned in. No, sweetheart, you might just lift us all up. After lunch, Ava was given a seat beside the director's assistant. From there, she could see both the monitors and the floor space. She watched how the crew reacted to the lighting calls, how the actors stayed in character even between takes, how the grips adjusted reflectors without speaking. Everything felt like choreography, delicate, intentional, and still she drew. One of the production designers noticed her page and crouched beside her. He didn't speak at first, just observed. You redesigned that character's outfit? He said eventually. Ava blinked. Oh, I just thought his jacket should hang heavier. He's supposed to be grieving. That fabric looks stiff. The designer smiled. You're not wrong. We had budget issues and went with polyester. You caught it from a sketch? She nodded. He stood, amused. Not bad, rookie. By late afternoon, Grace, Lynn, the director, called Keanu and Diane to the monitor bank. Who's the kid? She asked calmly, pointing to Ava. Keanu gave a soft smile. Someone with an eye. Grace crossed her arms. She's got notes, good ones. Someone left her sketch pad open near the catering table. I flipped through it. She's not just watching, she's improving the scenes. Diane didn't flinch. We know. Grace nodded slowly. I don't usually say this, but I'd like her back. Quietly. No fanfare. Just let her watch. Diane turned to Keanu. She's passed the quiet test. That night, as Keanu drove Ava back to the shelter, she was quiet at first, but as they neared the entrance, she finally spoke. Was I okay? You were more than okay. Really? You were seen, not by the world, but by the right people. She smiled, a small, tired, hopeful smile. And that, Keanu added, is how every good story begins. As they pulled to a stop, Ava opened the car door, then paused. She turned to him. Thank you for not ignoring me when you could have. He shook his head. Thank you for making sure I couldn't. She stepped out into the evening air, her sketchbook hugged tightly to her chest. And though her footsteps were quiet, her presence had already started to echo in rooms she never imagined she'd walk into. 2 days later, Keanu sat alone in his home office, the sketchbook Ava had let him borrow resting open on the table. Her talent was astonishing, yes, but something deeper tugged at him. A familiarity in her line work. A kind of visual grammar he hadn't seen since the early days of his career. Shapes, shadow balance, emotion through movement. It wasn't just genius, it was legacy. He typed Ava's last name into his private contact system, Moreno. Then he cross-referenced it with old call sheets, crew lists, and storyboard credits from 2 decades ago. There it was. Luis Moreno, concept artist. Elena Cruz Moreno, visual development, freelance. Attached, Project Titanfall. Animation, pre-production, Warner Brothers 2007, canceled. That name stirred something in Keanu's memory. He opened a secure server where he stored old scripts, press materials, and rare production art he'd collected over the years. A folder buried deep had a pitch packet for Project Titanfall. He'd seen it once while working on a separate animation project in the late 2000s. The illustrations were bold. The emotional arcs in the outline were shockingly complex for an animated feature. The character designs, stylized, expressive, diverse. A vision ahead of its time. But that movie was never made. He picked up his phone and called someone he hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. "Charlie, it's Keanu. You were story editor at Warner during '07, right?" A pause. "Yeah, why? Do you remember a project called Titanfall?" The line went silent. "You're digging up ghosts, man. Need the truth." Another pause. Charlie finally sighed. It was one of the best pitches I'd ever seen. Studio loved it. But it vanished, overnight, like it never existed. Keanu leaned forward. "What happened?" Charlie hesitated. Rumor was one of the senior producers, big-name guy, lifted the core ideas and used them to greenlight his own film a year later. Whole department knew. But Moreno and his wife were freelancers. They had no union protections. When they pushed back, they got smeared, quietly blacklisted, couldn't find work after that. Keanu's jaw clenched. Who was the producer? Charlie didn't answer right away. "You sure you want to go there?" "I'm sure." Brandon Lang. Keanu closed his eyes. The name was poison. Brandon Lang had been behind a string of massive animated hits, always slick, always in control, but always surrounded by whispers of stolen credit. Keanu lowered the phone. "Thanks, Charlie. You didn't hear it from me." But Keanu sat in silence for a long moment. Then he looked back at Ava's sketchbook. Not a coincidence. Not just talent. She was carrying forward the work her parents had started, without even realizing it. A style born in injustice, a voice raised in shadow. And now, maybe, it was time for the truth to come to light. The next morning, Keanu drove to the valley and met with Diane at her office. He laid out Ava's sketchbook beside a printed version of the original Titanfall pitch packet he'd unearthed. She scanned through the pages, her eyes growing wide. "These aren't just similar," Diane said. "They're practically family." Keanu nodded. "They are." Diane turned to him, already guessing. "You think Lang stole it?" "I don't think. I know." Diane looked back at the artwork. "Keanu, this was years ago. The studios buried it. You go after Lang, you go after half the people who helped him climb. This won't be clean." "I'm not interested in clean," he replied. "I'm interested in right." Diane leaned back in her chair. "You want to expose this?" "Not yet. Not with noise. First I want proof. And then? Then I want to make the movie Ava's parents never got to finish." Diane stared at him. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious." She exhaled. "Okay, I know a few people who might still have archived emails, concept drafts, credit logs, but you'll need more than old paper to convince the press or the board." "I don't need the press," Keanu said. "I just need the truth and the right people to see it." Over the next few days, Diane and her assistant combed through dead files, reaching out to ex-employees, freelance artists, and an old intern who once worked under Lang. Bit by bit, they collected fragments. An early email where Luis pitched the core story beats, a style guide Elena designed, a confidential memo showing the project's abrupt shutdown 3 weeks before Lang's own animation project was greenlit, one with eerily similar themes and design. It wasn't direct theft on paper, but the dots connected. Keanu kept Ava in the dark, for now. She had enough to process. He didn't want her carrying the weight of betrayal and injustice before she had a chance to stand tall on her own. But something burned in him, a cold, righteous anger. Luis Moreno had died believing his work was forgotten. Elena Cruz Moreno had passed without recognition, and their daughter had wandered the streets with nothing but a sketchbook and a belief in one man. Because he hadn't looked away. Keanu wasn't about to let that belief go unanswered. On a quiet Sunday evening, he sat in his study again, flipping through Ava's drawings for the 10th time. This wasn't about charity anymore. It wasn't about kindness or mentorship. This was about justice, legacy, and a stolen future that deserved to be restored. He made one final call that night, to a director he trusted, someone with indie roots and a rebellious heart. I have a story, and I want you to help me tell it. What kind of story? That should have changed everything 20 years ago, and now just might. Ava had no idea what was building around her. She was spending her afternoons quietly shadowing the storyboarding team on Keanu's set, listening more than speaking. At night, she returned to the shelter, where Carla helped her manage her class schedule, her meals, and her sketch routine. Ava was finally sleeping through the night. One afternoon, Diane handed her a stack of blank story panels and told her, "Design whatever world you want, anything, no limits." Ava blinked. "Why?" "Because you're ready." She didn't ask more. She just started drawing. A floating city with glowing bridges. A child with wings that grew as she learned to trust herself. A fractured family stitched back together by memory. Ava's imagination spilled across the panels like it had been caged for years, and now finally found sky. Meanwhile, Keanu, Diane, and the director he'd recruited, Miles Grayson, began shaping a quiet plan. They would develop the abandoned Titanfall project into something new, not stolen, not buried, but reborn. They wouldn't use the original title, that belonged to the past. But the heart of the story, the visual grammar, the spirit of Louis and Elena's work, that would live. Diane prepared the pitch packet under a code name. Keanu approached a new animation studio known for giving space to underrepresented creators. Quiet meetings, careful hands. Trusted lawyers reviewed the evidence they'd gathered and confirmed that the Morenos could have sued, had they lived. The studio executives didn't just listen. They leaned in. One of them, a woman who had started as an animator herself, wept after seeing the original concepts and Ava's updated panels side by side. "This girl is the future of our industry," she said, "and this is her inheritance." They offered to option the project on one condition: Ava must be credited as lead concept artist, with mentorship from senior designers. Keanu agreed, but first he had something else to do. He asked Diane to schedule a meeting with Brandon Lang. "Are you sure you want to do this face-to-face?" she asked. "Yes." "Where?" Keanu looked out the window at the early evening sky. "Because he'll remember my face more than my words." The confrontation was coming, but not yet. For now he watched Ava grow. Her eyes had changed, less guarded, more alive, her hands more confident, her smile no longer rare. He hadn't told her what he was doing behind the scenes, not yet. But when she handed him a new panel and asked, "What do you think?" he smiled. "I think your parents would be proud." And for the first time, Ava didn't look down. She nodded. "So am I." The storm from the past had risen, but this time, Keanu wasn't going to let it bury anyone. This time, the storm would clear the sky for something long overdue. It was just past dusk when Ava found him outside the studio, leaning against the hood of his car, sipping a thermos of green tea. The day had been long. Meetings, emails, a storyboard revision session that stretched an extra 2 hours, but none of it had worn him down the way he expected. Somehow, Ava's quiet determination had become a kind of fuel for him, a reminder that some things were still worth fighting for. She approached slowly, holding something to her chest, a small envelope, yellowed at the edges, its flap sealed tight with old adhesive and time. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Mr. Reeves, I think this is yours." He straightened up, surprised. Ava offered the envelope with both hands. On the front, in delicate cursive, were the words, "To be given to Mr. Keanu Reeves, if he ever appears." His brows furrowed. "What is this?" "I found it, after my mom died. It was in a sketchbook drawer with her old art. I didn't open it. I didn't even understand it back then. But now, I think I was meant to give it to you." He took the envelope gently, fingers brushing the handwritten name. The ink had faded slightly, but the intention hadn't. He stepped aside and motioned to a nearby bench. "Sit with me." Ava nodded. Under the soft glow of a parking lot lamp, Keanu carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The paper crackled softly. He began to read. "Mr. Reeves, you probably don't remember me. My name is Elena Cruz Moreno. I worked on set briefly during a concept phase in 2007. It was only a few weeks. I was just a face in the art department. But one afternoon you passed by my desk, noticed a drawing I was working on, and stopped. You said, 'This is beautiful. Don't let them dull your edges.' You probably didn't think twice about it, but I did. That day, my husband and I were deciding whether to keep fighting for a story we believed in, a story that meant everything to us, but one the studio was starting to ignore. That small moment, your words, gave me a bit of light. We kept going longer than we might have just because someone believed we had something worth holding on to. Our story didn't end the way we hoped. You'll hear why, if this ever reaches you. But if it does, it means our daughter has found you, or you found her. Either way, I believe in divine timing. Her name is Ava, and she's going to need someone one day, someone good, someone strong, someone who sees her. If that someone is you, then I thank you with my Elena." Keanu folded the letter slowly, his hands still for a long moment. The wind rustled through a nearby tree, but neither of them moved. When he finally looked at Ava, his voice was soft. "She remembered." Ava blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. "You said something kind to her once?" "I don't remember the moment, but it sounds like something I'd say." They both smiled faintly and then fell into silence again, one that didn't feel empty but full. Keanu stared down at the letter in his lap, the weight of its words anchoring him in a way few things had in years. It wasn't just the gratitude, it was the foresight, the strange, profound truth that somewhere deep in the past, a mother had trusted the universe to deliver a message across time and grief. He turned to Ava again, this time, really looking. "You held on to this for years?" She nodded. "I didn't know why. It felt sacred. I used to think it was just some weird coincidence, but now, after everything, I don't think it was." "No," Keanu said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Neither do I." He placed the letter gently into the inside pocket of his jacket. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, trying to process the weight of it all. Ava watched him carefully, unsure if she should say more. "My mom always said you had kind eyes," she finally said. When she talked about that day, her face would light up. She said, "If we ever lost everything, I should look for kindness, real kindness." She thought you might still be out there. Keanu pressed a hand to his mouth, holding back the emotions creeping up his throat. He didn't cry, but his eyes were glassy. "I wasn't out there," he said slowly. "I was busy filming, traveling, disappearing into roles. But you still found me." "No," Ava said. "I think you found me." That silence returned, but this time it settled around them like a blanket. When they stood to leave, Keanu placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're not invisible anymore, Ava." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I never wanted to be famous," she said. "Just seen. You are, loud and clear." Back at the shelter, Keanu walked her to the entrance, waved goodnight to Carla, and watched Ava disappear through the door with her sketchbook hugged tightly to her chest. He remained outside for a long while. The stars had come out, scattered across the Los Angeles sky like faint memories. He looked up at them and thought about Elena, thought about Louis, thought about how a single kind sentence could ripple across decades and still arrive with purpose. When he returned home, he pinned the letter to the corkboard above his writing desk, next to photos of his own mother, old scripts, and faded ticket stubs from childhood. That night, for the first time in months, he wrote something for himself. Not a role, not a contract, just thoughts. Thoughts about fate, about legacy, about how sometimes the smallest kindness is actually the greatest act of love, and how sometimes being found is the beginning of everything. Keanu sat in his quiet study with a tablet in hand, thumbing slowly through scans of Ava's sketchbook. The images glowed with intensity even on a screen. Scene compositions layered with symbolism, character expressions that radiated emotion, action sequences that captured chaos and clarity all at once. It wasn't just art. It was storytelling without words. He had been thinking for days about how to protect her and uplift her at the same time. Hollywood could be cruel, especially to the young and unprepared, but hiding her work seemed just as unfair. He called Diane. "I want to release some of Ava's work," he said, anonymously. Dan hesitated. "Keanu, the second people know she's under your wing, the vultures will circle. She's a minor. They'll dig into her past. I won't name her. Just share her talent. Let the world respond first. Then we'll decide how to move." Diane agreed. Together, they chose 10 sketches from Ava's digital portfolio. Concepts for animated scenes, reimagined character sheets, and one breathtaking double-page panel showing a protagonist falling through shattered glass, each shard holding a memory. Keanu uploaded them to a discreet portfolio website under the pseudonym AM Sky. Then he posted the link from an old social account he rarely used. No caption, just, "Some stories need no words. Remember this name, AM Sky." He powered off his phone and went for a walk. By morning, the internet had exploded. Artists on Twitter were reposting the link with captions like, "Who is this? And this is better than half the storyboards I've seen in production this year." Directors and cinematographers chimed in, commenting on the emotional depth and visual storytelling. Comic book creators were tagging each other, animators were dissecting her perspective techniques. Within hours, hashtags started trending. AMFC, Silent Genius, and eventually, Who is AMFC? By noon, an article on Variety ran with the headline, "The Mysterious Teen Artist Changing the Way Hollywood Sees Storyboards." Keanu sat in Diane's office, watching it unfold on her monitor. "I've never seen anything like this," she muttered. "Not this fast." "Because it's real," Keanu said. "No filters, no hype, just pure story." He received a direct message from a rising indie director. "If you ever find out who this AM Sky is, please tell them I want to hire them. Doesn't matter what age. I've seen enough." That's vision. Still, Keanu waited. That night, he visited Ava at the youth shelter. She was in the small common room, sitting cross-legged on a beanbag, sketching a nighttime alleyway scene with two silhouettes, one large, one small, sharing a bag of fries on a curb. He showed her his phone. "This is your work, and this is what people are saying." She read in silence, mouth slightly open. Then she looked at him. "But they don't know it's me?" "Not yet. Do you want them to?" Ava hesitated. "I don't want fame, I want a chance. A real one, like my parents never got." "You're getting one," he said softly, "and you've earned every bit of it." She smiled for the first time in days. The next day, Keanu sat down for an interview. Not a red carpet junket or talk show appearance. This was a quiet one-on-one with an independent journalism platform he trusted. Intimate, focused on stories that mattered. The interviewer leaned forward. You recently shared some work from an anonymous artist, AM Sky. The industry is buzzing. Any updates? Keanu nodded. Ava is her real name. She's 13 years old. She's experienced more loss than most adults. But what she's created, it speaks volumes. Her sketchbook isn't just art. It's survival, memory, grief, hope. The interviewer's eyes widened. 13? Keanu reached into his jacket and pulled out a scan of Ava's cover sketch, the falling protagonist surrounded by shards of their life. She told me she didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to be seen. Her parents were both artists. They believed in stories more than anything. They died too young. And Ava, she found her way to me. He paused. I didn't find her through Hollywood. I found her outside a cafe, limping, homeless, carrying her entire life in a sketchbook. The silence in the studio was heavy. I'm not here to make a movie about her, Keanu said. I'm here to help her make her own. By the time the interview aired that night, the internet had transformed again. The hashtag Ava deserves a chance flooded social media. Celebrities shared it. Schools started asking if Ava could one day speak to their art students. Talent agencies tried reaching out. Diane handled those personally, rejecting most. Fan art of Ava's characters popped up within hours. One animator said, "I haven't been this inspired in years." At the shelter, Ava watched the interview alone in the rec room. She didn't cry, but she curled her arms around her knees and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Keanu showed up later that night with a small package. Inside was a brand new sketchbook. On the first page he had written, "For Ava. To be seen is one thing, to tell the story. That's where the power lives. Go write yours." She hugged it to her chest. 2 days later, a letter arrived, addressed to Ava, written by a woman who had once worked with her parents on a storyboard team. It read, "I was there when they pitched their dream project. I remember your mother's eyes. I see the same fire in yours. Keep going." Ava pinned it above her shelter bed. What had started as a shadow trailing Keanu through the city had become something else entirely. Movement. A restoration. A rising. The morning after Keanu's heartfelt interview aired, Diane's phone rang non-stop. She sat at her kitchen counter, scrolling through a flood of messages from studio executives, agents, and media producers. Everyone wanted to support the young artist, to amplify her voice, to bring her vision to life. But as Diane read between the lines, something felt off. 3 major studios sent formal offers. Each promised Ava internships, mentorships, and access to development teams. One even offered to option her sketchbook as the basis for a new animated feature. But the more Diane reviewed the paperwork, the clearer it became these weren't genuine opportunities. They were contracts dressed as kindness. Ava's name would be attached, her story used for PR, and her creative control taken the moment ink hit paper. Diane called Keanu. "You need to come by the office," she said. Keanu arrived an hour later, hair still damp from the shower, wearing a hoodie and jeans. Diane slid the contracts across her desk. "They're slick," she said. "Each one praises Ava's vision, each one promises development, but none of them actually let her lead. She'd be a footnote by the second meeting." Keanu read in silence, his jaw tightening. "They think because she's young and has no parents, she's easy to handle. They think because she's a girl with no agent, she won't notice what they're stealing." He set the papers down. "It's not a commodity," he said. Diane folded her arms. "So what do we do?" Keanu looked out the window. Across the street, he saw a group of kids walking to school, backpacks bouncing. Among them was a girl who reminded him of Ava. Thin arms, oversized hoodie, eyes that held more awareness than a child should carry. He turned back to Diane. "We build something better?" That afternoon, Keanu visited Ava at the shelter. She was in the art room, sketching a character sprinting through a canyon filled with mirrors. She looked up when he walked in and smiled shyly. "Hey," she said, "you were on TV again." "Yeah," he said, sitting beside her, "and now everybody wants a piece of you." Ava looked down at her sketchbook. "I figured. Well, we've been offered 3 internships, all fancy, all full of praise." She tensed. "Do I have to choose?" "No," he said, "because I turned them all down." Her eyes widened. "You what?" He chuckled. "You're not a trophy, Ava. You're a storyteller. You don't belong in a boardroom full of people trying to figure out how to sell you. You belong somewhere you can build something." She stared at him, blinking hard. "So," he continued, "we're doing it differently. Diane and I are launching a mentorship initiative. Small, focused, creative first. You'll be the very first youth creative in residence at my production company." Ava's mouth fell open. "You'll have access to artists, editors, camera techs, animators, not as someone to be paraded around, but as part of the team. You get to watch how films are made from day one. You'll have your own desk, your own sketching space, a voice in meetings." She swallowed. "Even though I'm just 13? Exactly because you're 13. You see things the rest of us stopped seeing." He leaned forward. "You're not a project. You're a person, and you belong here." The next few weeks unfolded like a dream. Ava moved into transitional housing arranged by the shelter's outreach program. It wasn't permanent, but it was safe, quiet, and hers. She had her own room, her own desk, and a key to the front door. She clutched it like it was gold. Every weekday, a car picked her up and brought her to Keanu's production office in Burbank. It wasn't flashy, no marble floors or ego-driven architecture. It was a creative workspace, open tables, messy mood boards, sketches taped to walls. Ava stepped inside, like someone stepping into light. Her first day, the team gathered in a small room to introduce themselves. Writers, concept artists, costume designers, producers, all looking at her with curiosity, but not pity. "This is Ava," Keanu said, standing beside her. "She's going to teach us a few things about how to see again." Ava gave a nervous wave. Someone handed her a lanyard with a badge. "Creative Resident, Ava Moreno." Later that day, Diane took her on a tour of the studio. They passed the editing bay, the storyboarding floor, the costume workshop. "This," Diane said, stopping at a door marked Development Lab, "is where your brain gets to go wild." Inside was a sunlit room with floor-to-ceiling whiteboards, shelves of reference books, and stacks of blank sketch pads. A large table sat in the center, surrounded by swivel chairs. "This whole space is yours on Wednesdays and Fridays," Diane said. "You can call meetings, invite collaborators, or just sit here and sketch. Your ideas matter here." Ava whispered, "Thank you." That evening, Keanu stopped by to check in. He found her sitting cross-legged on the carpet of the development lab, sketchbook in hand, surrounded by colored pencils. He crouched beside her. "How was your first day?" She looked up, cheeks flushed with excitement. "I didn't want it to end." He smiled. "That's how you know you're in the right place." She flipped open a new sketch and showed him a scene she'd drawn. 2 people standing in the rain, one holding an umbrella over the other, while the rest of the world rushed by. In the background was a cafe. Inside, a little girl was sketching alone. Keanu stared at it for a long moment. "That's beautiful," he said. She tilted her head. "You think maybe that's how stories begin? Not with big explosions, but with someone stopping in the rain?" He nodded. "I do now." Word spread about the new mentorship program. Other young artists from underserved backgrounds began applying. Diane and Keanu planned carefully, choosing only a few each year. It would never be about volume. It would be about meaning, integrity, belief. As for Ava, she wasn't on billboards, she wasn't on magazine covers, but she was exactly where she needed to be. And she was no longer invisible. The name had lived in Ava's mind like a quiet song. Starlight Atlas. Her father used to whisper it when he tucked her in. Her mother once embroidered the words on the corner of a pillowcase. But for most of her life, it had been just that. A memory. A title without a shape. Till now, with Keanu's support, Ava began to trace the fragments her parents had left behind. She started with a box of old storyboards, hidden in a storage unit once rented under her mother's maiden name. The shelter counselor helped her retrieve it. Inside were drawings curled at the edges, a flash drive taped to a sketchbook, and a folder labeled Pitch 3, Seer. When she showed it to Keanu and Diane, both grew quiet. Diane flipped through the pitch folder. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't just a concept. This is a fully realized world. Keanu nodded slowly. And I've seen some of these images before, not under your parents' names. They knew what it meant. Ava's parents hadn't simply been small-time artists lost in the noise. They had created something visionary, something someone else had stolen. Keanu reached out to a friend in post-production who now worked in digital archiving. They combed through years of old studio footage looking for records of the project. After weeks of effort, the friend emailed Diane and Keanu a silent video file labeled Testreel-Atlas DM/RM. The footage was grainy but brilliant. A young girl in a suit of glowing armor raced across a neon sky, her shadow stretching into a constellation. A narrator spoke of forgotten maps and cosmic refugees. It was unlike anything on screens today. Emotional, mythical, grounded in heart. Ava sat in the corner watching it loop, silent. "That's her," she whispered. "Who?" Diane asked. "The girl in the suit. My mom modeled her after me." Keanu stood beside her, stunned. "This is the kind of story people remember forever." They reached out to a lawyer Diane trusted, someone who had once defended a young animator in a rights dispute. They uploaded the project documents, including Ava's hand-drawn supplements and her parents' original concept files, along with time-stamped drafts from years earlier. The legal battle wasn't glamorous. It was slow, tense, ugly at moments. The studio currently holding the intellectual property fought back with silence at first, then with deflection, and finally with dismissive statements about misunderstandings and creative coincidences. But Keanu wasn't interested in threats. He made quiet calls. A respected director, a former studio head, a cinematographer who had once worked with Ava's mother. And they remembered. They remembered the pitch, the couple, the story that lit up a conference room for 5 minutes before the lights were dimmed by greed. One by one, they gave sworn statements. The tide turned. Soon, news outlets began reporting the truth. Ava Moreno's parents had once pitched Starlight Atlas in its full, original form. Industry insiders had long whispered about how a similar project suddenly appeared under a different title just months later. Now, the whispers had names, documents, a voice. Ava, she didn't seek revenge. She didn't want money. She wanted the story told the right way. Her way. When the final ruling arrived, Diane read the verdict aloud in Keanu's office. All rights and creative property associated with the original version of Starlight Atlas are to be returned to the estate of Daniel and Rosa Moreno, with shared guardianship granted to their minor daughter, Ava Moreno. Ava sat frozen for a moment. Then she smiled, quietly. The next day, she returned to her sketchpad. This time, she wasn't just sketching characters. She was reboarding entire sequences, mapping arcs, refining color palettes. Within a month, Keanu's company formally announced a new production partnership. Starlight Atlas would be revived as an independent animated feature. Keanu would serve as executive producer, and Ava, at 13 years old, was named co-creative director. It made headlines, not because of the revenge narrative, not even because of the lawsuit, but because Ava's vision had won. Her art, her memory, and her parents' legacy were no longer buried in contracts or backroom politics. They were alive. She joined design meetings with seasoned artists twice her age, offering insights that reshaped entire scenes. She corrected perspectives, suggested musical themes. She made sure the main character, a girl from a broken world who found magic in a forgotten star map, spoke not just to children, but to the invisible hearts everywhere. One day, Diane found Ava in the voice booth helping direct a scene. She watched the young girl give notes to a veteran actor who had done over 50 animated films. He listened carefully, nodded. After the session, Diane asked him, "You okay taking direction from a teenager?" He smiled. That wasn't a teenager, that was a storyteller. Meanwhile, Keanu watched the animatics come together. Each frame shimmered with purpose. It wasn't just a film. It was healing, memory, redemption. Ava never once asked for credit beyond her parents' names to be listed first. She requested a single title card before the opening scene, for the stories that never got told, until now. At the premiere announcement, people from every part of the industry sent messages, not just of congratulations, but of apology. Apologies for the silence, for not seeing her parents, for letting things get lost. Keanu gave a quiet speech that day. He didn't mention names. He didn't shame anyone. He simply said this: sometimes the brightest stories are the ones that were buried. Ava found the courage to dig hers up, and all we did was listen. When the lights dimmed and the first frame of Starlight Atlas hit the screen, Ava held Keanu's hand. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She had reclaimed what was lost, and she had done it with grace. The sky over Santa Fe was a deep shade of violet as dusk settled over the adobe buildings and string-lit walkways of the Independent Film Festival. The old theater hosting the closing night screening buzzed with quiet excitement. Not because of a massive blockbuster, not because of a celebrity scandal, but because of something much rarer. A debut born of memory, love, and defiance. Starlight Atlas was the final screening of the night. The theater had never been this full. Rows of local artists, journalists, studio scouts, and young aspiring animators packed the venue. The murmurs weren't about box office numbers. They were about heart, about the impossible, about the fact that a 14-year-old girl, once homeless, had co-directed an animated feature based on the forgotten work of her late parents. Keanu arrived quietly, dressed in simple black, his hair tied back. He walked with Ava, now wearing a pressed navy dress and scuffed sneakers. Her hair was neatly brushed, but she still clutched her sketch pad to her chest like armor. Her eyes scanned the marquee in disbelief. Her name was up there. Ava Moreno, co-creative director. They walked in through the side entrance. Festival staff escorted them through back halls lined with photographs of past screenings, old legends who had stood where she now stood. Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder as they entered the green room. She exhaled slowly. "They're not here to see me," she said. He shook his head gently. "They're here because of your story, and they'll stay because of your voice." The film opened with a hush. Not a single cell phone screen lit up. The moment the first scene played, a child floating through stardust, reaching for a map that shimmered like memory, the audience leaned forward. Dialogue faded into music, music into color, color into emotion. By the end of the first act, there were sniffles. By the middle of the second, full tears. And when the credits rolled, nobody moved. It was as if the room had stopped breathing. Then someone stood, clapping, loud and certain. Another followed, then another. A standing ovation roared through the theater, echoing off the domed ceiling. People weren't just applauding the animation, they were applauding the journey, the persistence, the return of something long thought erased. Keanu leaned down toward Ava. "You ready?" he asked. She looked at him, eyes glossy but steady. "Let's do it." They walked onto the stage together as the lights rose. Cameras flashed, but Ava didn't flinch. Keanu stepped back, letting her stand alone behind the mic. She paused for a full 10 seconds. The room waited. Then she spoke. "My name is Ava Moreno," she began. Her voice cracked on the second word, but she held firm. "I'm 14 years old. I never went to film school. I didn't even have a home a year ago." The silence deepened. "My parents, Daniel and Rosa Moreno, dreamed of this story before I was born. They believed stories could outlive pain, that they could hold light even in the darkest places. I grew up watching them sketch until their fingers ached. I watched them fight for something they knew mattered." She paused to breathe, then continued. "But when I was 10, our lights went out. We lost everything. And then I lost them." A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. For a long time, I didn't speak. I just drew. I lived in corners and shadows and library aisles. But the drawings, those were never just mine. They were pieces of my parents, still talking to me. She looked over at Keanu. Holmes Day, someone looked back at me. Someone who didn't turn away. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Mr. Reeves, you didn't just see a kid with dirt on her face. You saw a story waiting to be remembered, and you helped me remember it." She held up her sketch pad. "This is the only thing I saved. It has tears on every page. Some of them are mine, some are my mom's, some are probably ketchup." Laughter broke through the emotion gently, respectfully. "But this movie isn't just about animation or art. It's about not letting go. Even when the world forgets you, even when it tries to erase you. And it's for every kid who thinks they're too small to matter." The applause began again, this time slower, more reverent. When she stepped back, Keanu gave her a quiet nod. The host of the festival joined them on stage, calling it the most moving comeback story Hollywood's ever seen. One journalist tweeted within seconds, "Ava Moreno just changed what a debut can mean." And Keanu Reeves showed the world what mentorship truly is. Backstage, Ava sat down with her head in her hands, not from embarrassment, but from relief. Diane hugged her tightly. "You just gave every silent artist a voice," Deanne whispered. Later that night, when the crowd thinned and the cameras dimmed, Ava sat alone in the empty theater's front row. Keanu found her there, staring at the credits as they looped quietly on screen. "I don't think I'll ever get used to this," she said. "You shouldn't," Keanu replied, "because this means you never lost who you were meant to be." And in that moment, surrounded by flickering light and fading echoes, Ava didn't feel small. She felt whole. After the screening of Starlight Atlas, as the crowd slowly dispersed into the cool Los Angeles night, the festival's post-credits interview began. It was a small, dimly lit side stage with a few chairs and a single camera crew. The press was buzzing, eager to speak with the young prodigy everyone had just witnessed. Ava Moreno, 14 years old, sat down beside Keanu Reeves, her hands nervously twisting the hem of her dress. She looked like a child in many ways, but her eyes held something far older, something that had seen both loss and light. A moderator welcomed the audience, then turned gently to Ava, with a question that silenced the entire room. "Ava," she said, her voice kind but direct, "before any of this happened, before tonight, before the mentorship, before Starlight Atlas, you followed Keanu Reeves for 3 days. Why?" The room waited. Ava blinked slowly. She could have laughed it off, could have dodged the question with a joke, but she didn't. Instead, she looked up at the moderator, then at the quiet crowd, then finally at Keanu. Her voice didn't shake, but it was soft, like a whisper you had to lean in to hear. "Because I was looking for someone," she said, "someone who wouldn't walk past me." That one sentence shifted the energy in the room. People stopped fidgeting. The crew lowered their cameras slightly, and Keanu, seated beside her, turned his head, eyes narrowing just slightly, not out of confusion, but to hold the weight of her words with more care. Ava's voice steadied as she continued. I'd been invisible for months. On the streets, you stop being a person. You become a shadow, a thing people avoid looking at. Even if they see you, they don't see you. And when you're a kid, when you're small and alone, you start to believe that maybe they're right, that maybe you don't matter. She paused again, breathing in slowly. My dad used to tell me that Keanu Reeves was the only person in Hollywood who didn't pretend to be someone else off camera, that he was the same man in the shadows as he was in the spotlight. I didn't understand what that meant until I had nothing left, and then I remembered what he said. So I looked for you. Keanu's eyes lowered, his expression unreadable, but his jaw clenched. Just barely. Ava turned slightly toward him now, speaking directly to him even though the microphone still caught every word. I didn't follow you because you were famous. I followed you because I was scared. And I didn't want to be scared anymore. And I thought, if I could just give you my sketchbook, if you could just look at it and say something kind, maybe I'd remember how to breathe again. Silence followed. Even the audience members who had only moments earlier been capturing selfies with the cast now sat frozen, some covering their mouths, others wiping at their eyes. Keanu nodded slowly, but didn't interrupt her. He didn't need to. Ava's truth was unshakable now. It didn't need backup. I didn't know what would happen next, she said, looking down at her hands. I didn't expect all this. The shelter, the set, the mentorship, the movie. All I really wanted was to be seen. And you did that. The moderator, clearly moved, didn't speak right away. The silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Ava's words had landed deeper than anyone expected, not just because of what she said, but how simply she'd said it. No self-pity, no drama, just truth, raw and unguarded. After a moment, the moderator gently asked, "And when Keanu finally did speak to you, what changed?" Ava smiled faintly and looked at Keanu again, her gaze warm, filled with the kind of gratitude that doesn't come from a single gesture, but from 1,000 moments of being made to feel human again. He asked me what I wanted, she said. He asked me if I was okay. There was something about the way she said it, like that one question had built a bridge back to herself. Her voice softened as she continued. That night, after I fell and he helped me up, I wasn't just hurt, I was ashamed. I thought he'd be angry or scared or tell someone to take me away, but he didn't. He knelt down, gave me water, and treated me like I mattered. A journalist in the back sniffled quietly. Another one put their phone down and just listened. The story was no longer about a child prodigy or a surprise hit film. It had become something else, something bigger. It had become a moment of reflection for everyone in the room. Ava looked out toward the audience now, her voice carrying more confidence. There's something really scary about being forgotten, she said. And when my parents died, I didn't just lose them. I lost everything that made me feel real. Their stories, their love, the way they looked at me when I showed them a drawing. I started to feel like I was fading. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, worn and crinkled. She held it up briefly, then laid it in her lap. This is one of the last drawings I did before I met Keanu. It's just a sketch of a streetlight in the rain. I drew it sitting on the curb outside a library, right before I saw him for the first time. And I remember thinking, I'll never be anything more than this, just something washed out and forgotten. The image was simple, but her words gave it power. Even without seeing the sketch, the audience could picture it, a lonely light, barely visible through the storm. But then he stopped. He looked right at me, and suddenly it was like I existed again. She turned to Keanu, voice cracking ever so slightly. You didn't just see me, You reminded me that I was still here." Keanu finally spoke. His voice was quiet, steady, and full of something only he could offer in a moment like this. "You reminded me why I started doing this in the first place." A few claps began to echo from the back, soft and respectful. Then the whole room joined in. Not an explosive ovation, but a standing one, slow and sincere, as if everyone collectively realized that they weren't just witnessing the rise of a young artist, they were witnessing a healing. Later that night, the interview clip made its way online, first through a few journalists who had recorded it on their phones, then through an official release. But it wasn't the premiere of Starlight Atlas that went viral. It was Ava's simple quote from the stage. "Because I was looking for someone who wouldn't walk past me, and he didn't." Within hours, the phrase was echoed across social media. Artists reposted it with sketches of dimly lit streets and wide-eyed girls clutching sketchbooks. Teachers shared it with captions about seeing potential in their students. Even paramedics and social workers chimed in, saying, "This is why we stop. This is why we look." A hashtag was born, "Don't walk past." But the ripple didn't stop with posts. A few days later, Keanu received a letter from a teacher in Detroit. She had printed Ava's words and taped them above her chalkboard. A formerly quiet student came up after class and whispered, "I know what she meant. I feel like that sometimes." In Chicago, a nonprofit started a citywide campaign encouraging people to carry "You Matter" cards, small, handwritten notes they could leave for strangers. Inspired by Ava's story, it caught on quickly. Over 50,000 cards were handed out within a week. And in Los Angeles, not far from where Ava first spotted Keanu on the street, a mural appeared overnight. It showed a young girl with a sketchbook walking past a glowing figure under a streetlight. Beside it, in bright, bold letters, "He didn't walk past her." Ava was overwhelmed. It wasn't about fame, it was about finally being understood. For years she had wandered through the world invisible, afraid her ideas would die with her. Now, those same ideas were sparking movement, empathy, and awareness. People were beginning to see the lonely kids on sidewalks, the quiet ones in back rows, the lost ones looking for someone who cared. Still, Ava stayed grounded. She remained committed to her mentorship program, shadowing animators and directors during the week, and taking online school sessions in the evenings. She never asked for interviews, and she didn't try to become a celebrity. She just kept drawing, pages and pages filled with life, emotion, wonder, and heartache. Keanu, meanwhile, gave fewer interviews than usual. When asked about Ava, he often smiled and said, "She has a voice. I'm just glad people are finally listening." Their bond grew stronger in private moments, sharing late-night script readings, quiet dinners with Diane and others, brainstorming ideas, not for profit, but for meaning. Ava once asked him if he thought all this happened for a reason. He responded with something her father might have said. "Sometimes the world breaks just enough to let the right light in." As the year went on, Ava began working on her own short film, a hand-drawn story called Streetlight. It followed a girl lost in the rain, carrying a sketchbook no one wanted, but at the very end, a man stops and kneels, and she realizes she was never invisible. She had just been waiting to be seen by someone who knew what looking really meant. When the teaser trailer dropped, it ended with one line on a black screen, "To the ones who didn't walk past me." The comment section lit up. People weren't just reacting to a film, they were responding to a reminder. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the courtyard of Keanu's production studio. The place was quiet at this hour. Most of the crew had gone home. But Keanu lingered near the far end of the lot, where a new mural had just been finished that morning. He stood before it in silence, hands in his pockets, breathing in the evening air. The mural was striking, a sweeping cosmic backdrop painted in deep purples and starlight blue. In the center, two figures, a man and woman holding each other in a burst of illustrated light. Above their heads, soft lettering read, "For those who told stories the world wasn't ready to hear. Miguel and Ava Moreno." It was Ava's parents. The mural had been Ava's idea, but Keanu made sure it became reality. Not just for her, for everyone who had ever been unseen, unheard, uncredited. For every artist who had something to say and no platform to speak from. He took a slow step closer and reached out, his fingers lightly brushing the painted surface. The moment felt bigger than art, bigger than the building behind him. This was a full-circle closing of a loop he hadn't known he was in. Ava had changed everything. He still remembered the first time he saw her. Thin, cloaked in grime, lurking in shadows like a scared animal. She didn't say much then, just handed him that napkin sketch. And in her eyes, he'd seen something. Not desperation, not danger, but hunger. A creative hunger to be seen, to connect. In the beginning, it haunted him. Why him? Why follow him of all people? He thought maybe it was about fame, or maybe safety, but it was deeper than that. Ava had followed him because she believed something her father once said, that Keanu Reeves was the last good man in Hollywood. He shook his head softly, almost chuckling under his breath. He didn't know if that was true, but what mattered was that she believed it. And now the industry knew her name. The world had met her heart through her art. Starlight Atlas was only the beginning. Ava wasn't a prodigy. She was a movement. And she didn't get there through a viral tweet or a lucky break. She got there through pain, perseverance, and raw talent. But more than that, she got there because someone saw her. That thought stayed with him. The idea of sight. Not the kind that lets you scan a crowd or read a script, but the kind that looks deeper. The kind that pauses, just for a moment, to consider what someone might be carrying before rushing past. He turned slightly, eyes catching the soft glint of a new plaque mounted beside the mural. It read, "When someone is invisible, they don't disappear. They wait to be seen. Thank you for seeing me." Keanu swallowed hard. He hadn't known about the plaque. Ava must have had it installed as a surprise, a thank you. He felt the words sink in, not with pride, but with humility. She was right. The world was full of invisible brilliance. Kids sketching under freeway overpasses, veterans playing piano in subway tunnels, women who write screenplays after working double shifts, men who build stories in their heads to escape whatever's breaking them. And most of the time, people walk right past, not out of cruelty, just blindness. But what if, just once, someone stopped? He hadn't done it perfectly, he hadn't known what to do, but he stopped, and that changed both their lives. He exhaled slowly, his thoughts thick with memory and meaning. Keanu stepped back from the mural, his shoes crunching softly on the gravel as he turned to face the rest of the courtyard. The lights from the studio windows glowed behind him. Somewhere in one of those rooms, Ava was likely sketching storyboards, her pencil dancing across the page, already building the next world. It amazed him how close they had come to never meeting, how easily he could have dismissed that first napkin sketch as just a random fan drawing, how easily he could have called security instead of stopping. How many times in his own life had he passed by people without looking, too lost in his own thoughts to notice their silent signals? This wasn't just about Ava. It was about 100 other young minds out there, hiding their gifts behind fear and rejection. It was about what happens when the world finally pauses and listens to a quiet voice. He thought about Ava's words during the interview after the premiere, the moment that had gone viral across every platform. The reporter had asked her, "Why Keanu? Why follow him for 3 days?" And she had paused, stared straight into the camera, and said, Because I was looking for someone who wouldn't walk past me. And he didn't. That line had echoed far beyond the theater walls. In classrooms, in living rooms, across board meetings and social media feeds. It struck a chord with millions, not because it flattered him, but because it reminded people of something universal. We all want to be seen, and we all have the power to see. Keanu slowly walked toward a small wooden bench placed just beyond the mural. He sat, resting his arms on his knees. For a long moment, he simply listened to the wind pushing through the trees on the edge of the property. Then he spoke softly into the camera that had been set up across the lot, rolling quietly for a closing message. He looked into the lens, not as a movie star, but as a man who had been changed. "There's something I've learned through all of this," he said. "Sometimes the person you're meant to help isn't screaming. They're silent. They're standing just outside your line of sight, hoping for a sign they matter." Ava didn't need saving. She needed someone to pause, to listen, to believe. He let the words breathe, then added, "We all pass people every day who go unseen. But brilliance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it waits in the shadows, hoping someone will notice." A final smile crept across his face, gentle, sincere. "So I want to ask you something," he said. "The next time you pass someone you'd normally ignore, just look a little closer. You never know who's hiding brilliance in the shadows." The screen slowly faded to black. A soft message appeared. Have you ever been surprised by someone others overlooked? Share your story in the comments. And what kind of story would you like to see Keanu in next? Leave your ideas below. We're listening. The music rose, quietly, hopeful, steady, warm. And somewhere in the distance, a pencil moved gently across paper. A new story was already beginning.